Welcome to The Individual Animal, a podcast about dogs, people, and animal sheltering. I'm your host, Nikki Ucum. I'm here with my co-host, Bernice Clifford. How you doing today, Bernice?
I'm doing great, Nikki. How are you?
I'm good. We are just coming off of recording with Caitlin Quinn and had a really great conversation, I think, about marketing. I'm working on putting a presentation for marketing together for a shelter we're working with. So I definitely took some tips back from her, from our conversation with her today.
Yes. Caitlin's amazing.
She is. She's molded me to the person I am today. Because when I started as an administrative, I didn't realize she started as an administrative assistant too. So we both started with the same titles and kind of, grew from there, which is really great. But if you're not familiar with Caitlin, she is an adjunct professor. She does a marketing and communication course for the University of Florida, the Master in Shelter Medicine program. She is also on the board of HeartSpeak, and she currently is doing some freelance marketing and consultant work. She talked with us about a lot of the work that she's done with HeartSpeak. I always want to put an S on that, and I know I'm not supposed to. She referenced a ton of different things that we're going to throw in the show notes. So if you want to check out anything that we talked about during the call with her, just go click the links in our show notes. And one exciting thing that she has coming up that you should be looking at that we didn't mention on the call is that HeartSpeak is launching some learn at your own pace courses in the spring, which sounds really great. Caitlin actually created the instructional design and some of those courses on bio writing and a bunch of other marketing type things that I think are going to be super valuable to anybody out there wanting to up their marketing game. So, yeah.
Right now in sheltering, we got to up our marketing games, unfortunately.
Yes, absolutely. So, we hope you enjoy Caitlin as much as we did, and stay tuned because I'm sure she'll be back as well. Fine. All right. Well, Caitlin, why don't you just start out by telling us where you started? I know you worked with us for a little while. That was really exciting. But even before Animal Farm and then after Animal Farm, just like a brief little summary of your journey through animal welfare.
Absolutely. I fell into animal welfare. I think like a lot of people, I didn't know that was an option until it was. And so I started with Animal Farm. I responded to an administrative assistant ad fresh out of college. And before that had definitely been an animal lover. So, anything that had to do with animals was definitely going to pique my interest. I asked for a dog every moment of every year of my life. And when I was 12, we got our first dog. So it was a long journey to get there. And grew up with cats and just was like obsessed with my neighbor's dogs. I was like that kid who, like, if your dog was outside, I was like, I'm coming to say hello. But I think that I feel really, and I'm not saying this just because I'm talking to you guys, but I feel very privileged to have started with Animal Farm Foundation and kind of grown in my roles there before I got into other parts of animal welfare, because it gave me, I think, a perspective that continues to inform the way that I think about marketing as community connection and thinking about marketing as a tool that puts the audience first. Like, that is constantly considering what are people who don't know everything that we know going to think about the language that we're using, the way that we're approaching talking about animals. All of that, I think, came definitely from starting by talking about pit bull dogs in 2008, 2009, right? Like, that was a very specific time in animal welfare. And I think that everything that's come after that was definitely informed by that entry into animal welfare. And then after Animal Farm, I started working with HeartSpeak. And similar to, HeartSpeak's focus was 100% on marketing in a lot of different areas. But similar to the time that I spent with Animal Farm Foundation, it was a lot of working with shelters in their own communities and being able to see that while we all do have unique circumstances, we also are all dealing with the same issues. And that kind of, I think that's a perspective that's also hard to come by if you're not doing that traveling around and not getting to see how much similarity there is in communities that may appear different from the outside, but that are sharing some of the same challenges.
Yeah, we really appreciate all of the marketing that you did while you were at Animal Farm because we still use a lot of it. One of your big projects, I remember when I started, you were just finishing up that infographic that you were working on with Labs & Co., which we use all of the time. So.
Oh my gosh. That makes me so happy. And that was collaborating with Jessica Dolce, who was helping out at the time too, and Labs & Co. And like, they're the ones that made it make sense, I feel like. So all credit to them. But I'm so glad to do that.
Yeah, that's great. So first, a lot of stuff we still, are using. You talked about community connection a little bit. And I know you talked about it a lot in blogs and stuff that I've read that you've put out. But what do you mean by that as in terms of marketing?
I think that I've started to think about marketing primarily as community connection. And I've kind of, maybe because I've been so immersed in that world, but I've kind of come to hate the term marketing a little bit because I think that it sounds a little bit slick and like intimidating sometimes. And it sounds like something that not all of us can do. And I think if we look at it from the perspective of just how do we best connect with our community to accomplish whatever the goal is, whether that's adoption, foster, donations, community programming, I think if we look at it as like, what is our lever to connect with the community, and a community that doesn't always understand the work that we're doing the same way that we do, right? They may have a different perspective or a different take on the work that we're doing. And I think that when I use community connection, it really is kind of like in its purest form of like, how do we literally start to make people pay attention to what we're doing and decide to engage with the programs that we're putting out?
I love that. You know how much we talk about how language is so important. So I love shifting. It's a great shift into really what we're all trying to do here, which is connect with our communities and each other.
Yeah. That language perspective is definitely like, I will take that into the rest of my life. I think that I learned.
Yeah. I feel like everything I say now, every like 4 sentences, I'm like, should that be something else? Or yeah. We actually are talking at Virginia Fed all about language, Bernice and Cynthia and I.
Oh, good.
In March.
Oh, that's exciting.
So, yeah, like 3 different perspectives. So like more like labeling and breed labeling and stuff like that. And then Bernice is talking about like behavior language, and Cynthia's talking about like more generalized language. So should be fun.
That's awesome.
Should be interesting.
Yeah. I wish I could go. That sounds fascinating.
I'm excited. It's the first time we're doing it, so hopefully we can build off of it. We're exciting. Yeah. So let's talk about ChatGPT. Full disclosure, the questions that I have here, I literally said, hey, ChatGPT, pretend you're a podcast interviewee interviewing Caitlin Quinn. Give me some questions. And then I got I sent them to like Hard Speaks and Animal Farm and stuff. And this is what, I tweaked them a little bit afterwards, but yeah. I love ChatGPT. I use it all the time.
Yeah. And I think so many people do. And I actually think that that's fine. Like, I think that it would be crazy not to use it, right? Like especially like if you are someone who is wearing a lot of hats, or like your role entails a lot of different moving parts. I think where it goes a little bit wrong is if we are not learning to prompt ChatGPT appropriately. So like everything that you just said about how you're using it, like you gave it context, which I think is so important. And you also edited it afterwards. So yeah. I think that those are the 2 key components to using any sort of AI as we move forward. Because I think I can sometimes, I just worked with the shelter recently where I was looking at their bios. They asked for just like a review of their bios, and you could tell that most of them were written by ChatGPT. And it was the fact that they look good on the surface, right? Like there's lots of, it appears very friendly. It appears very positive, which is wonderful. But if you just kind of dig a little bit deeper, you're like, well, I didn't actually get any information from this. Like it's a bunch of beautiful words. But I don't feel like I know anything. This feels very generic, and it feels really non-specific to this animal. And it also is very repetitive. And I think those are some of the hallmarks of AI, and where people start to just, where I think it will start to take away the meaning of some of what we do if we are constantly relying on it without those two kind of important components of like getting good at prompting it, being specific about what we're looking for, and then editing what is spit out of AI. And I think with prompts, depending on what we're using it for, but because I've been talking about it in the context of bio writing for pets, I think it's really important that we're still putting in some of what we know about that specific animal. Because if I just say, write a bio about a small brindle pit bull dog, and I give it nothing, who's like a little bit afraid of life, but that's describing my dog. Like, it's not going to give me very good information, right? Like it's just going to take those words, use some synonyms, put a nice, polish on it, but we're not going to know who Sally is on any deeper level. But if I know some other characteristics about her from spending time with her in the shelter at the rescue, then I can give just a little bit of context that will start to make that bio more meaningful.
Is there anywhere, a place where people can find like prompts to start with, like pretend you are or anything like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have like just a couple of them. There was a blog that I wrote for Heartspeak when I was with them that had a couple of prompts in it, and then I've seen Rescue Writer from PetSmart Charities, which is like AI specifically for bios for pets. They do give like a summary at the beginning of that tool that has some nice prompts, and at least gives you the context. Yeah, I feel like it just launched maybe in the last 6 months or so, and I stumbled upon it, so I hadn't seen it either. Like when I first came across it, I was like, oh, very surprised. But it is, again, like a tool that we can use, but we can't rely on it solely.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. I'm a huge ChatGPT fan, but definitely you start to realize, like, when you read things, you notice like what's been written with ChatGPT and what hasn't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if we just take the time that you were saying, like at the beginning and end of the process of using it, then we can make it sound a little bit more like us and less like we're all going to start sounding the same,
Yeah. Is there any, like, so ChatGPT is like the new age thing. Is there anything from your past in marketing that you would love to see like make a comeback? Or something that comes to mind for me is like memes, right? Memes used to be like the thing in marketing when I first started at Animal Farm. But not so much anymore. But
I think memes are a big one. I think like being able to capture the essence of something in like a single graphic with like, memes rely definitely on a little bit of pop culture context sometimes. So I think that they can be evergreen, like if they're not just taking advantage of like what's hot in the moment. But I still end up like gravitating towards memes, I feel like, on the internet. But that's probably the biggest one. From there, I think that we've grown in kind of some fun directions that are positive especially for like pet adoption marketing. But the rise of video, I think, is such a powerful tool for adoption marketing specifically, because I just think you can get so much more context in a video than you can in a still photo. As much as I love photos and still sometimes gravitate that way, and feel like all thumbs when it comes to TikTok. Like I can appreciate it, but I can't create it. I'm kind of at that point. But I think that, there's just so much more that someone can get from a 15 or 30-second clip of a dog or a cat interacting with a person, or just having like a quiet moment, than you can in a photo. Like you feel like you're getting to know that animal so much better through video. And so I think I'm excited about that kind of growth as we head into, like the current version of marketing.
Nice. Yeah. And is 15 or 30 seconds what you would recommend, Caitlin?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't go over 30 seconds at this point. And it's purely from, especially as TikTok and Reels and things like that have taken over social for the most part. I just think that those algorithms have trained people not to have an attention span longer than that. Like unless there's a real storytelling arc that's happening, I don't think people can hang in for longer than 30 seconds.
I know I can't, so yeah. I just was curious.
Exactly.
What is your advice to people that are like, oh, I don't want to be on camera, like this is hard? Like I think that's a big hurdle for people.
It is a big one. And I think that I am a little bit of a broken record about constantly like trying to encourage people to be in photos or videos, because I really believe in the power of being able to look at something and wanting to be there because you see another person in that photo or video. And I just think that we bring out the best of the animals often, as long as it's a comfortable situation for the animal that's being filmed or photographed. I think you can really see that. And I think that it really helps promote them. So I would say that for most of us, if we can prioritize the animals, right? If we think like, I don't really love to be in this, but this isn't about me. This is about getting this dog or cat adopted. That's the first hurdle to get over. And the second, I think, is really just looking at it from the perspective of like, what larger story are we telling, not just about this individual animal, but about our organization and how much we care for animals, and what's kind of the subtext to that marketing piece, so that we are building a bigger storytelling moment about our organization and how much we should be a trustworthy organization for the community, because look how much we care for the animals, so it's kind of pulling multiple levers at the same time. And at the very worst, if you feel like you absolutely cannot be on camera, then it's about like, how can we put this dog, at your feet, or can we have a hand on a head, or like that moment of connection that I feel like is still very powerful, even if it's not your face in the video.
Do you have an experience, because I know that you traveled a lot and visited a lot of shelters and helped them with their marketing. Is there anything that really sticks out to you of an organization that from like not a big marketing department to like really marketing their dogs really well?
That's such a good question. I think one of the experiences that stands out to me the most, and probably because of that growth, were there were a pair of rural shelters in North Carolina. They're two neighboring counties, and they were relying, all their staff are animal control officers, and very low staffing in both of the organizations. And they had a really nice core group of volunteers, but who hadn't ever received training on taking photos or writing bios. Like everybody was doing their level best, but it was not, they weren't all pulling in the same direction. Everybody was doing kind of their own thing. And so I think in that case, being able to work with them, and just really all we did was just get everybody on the same page, and kind of working from the same playbook in terms of like, this is how we're going to try to write bios, really working towards the positive marketing side of things, because they were very prone to just like the urgent posts of animals that were slated for euthanasia. And I think that just having everybody in the same room at the same time for those organizations was so powerful. Like I can't take credit for what happened after we left, because they really took the ball and ran with it. But the opportunity to get everybody on the same page, I think, was so powerful for those groups. And I feel like that's usually where I see the most growth, is some of the smaller organizations, but where everybody just needs that little bit of opportunity to talk with each other during the training and decide, this is how we're going to move forward.
Yeah, and get everybody excited all at the same time.
Exactly.
Right? To like
Exactly.
you know, sometimes when it's just the one person like coming back and being like, I want to do all these things, it's harder to get everybody on board.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
both of those organizations had leadership that was really supportive too. They weren't leaders that necessarily were like, I'm going to lead the charge in marketing, because they had a lot of other priorities to worry about, but they were leaders who were very willing to say like, this is how we're going to move forward. And I can't necessarily tell you how to market every single individual animal, but I'm going to step out of the way and let this, you know, kind of move forward. And I think that makes a powerful difference too, when someone is just supportive of a new direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you speaking at HSUS this year?
Not, no.
Oh. Is there like one campaign? I know like I saw your presentation at HSUS last year, and you and it was, who was with you? Who was speaking?
Tori from Casey Pet Project.
Yeah. Had some really great examples of like what other people are doing. But do you have like that one campaign that you'll always remember and like love so much? I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of them.
There's so many good ones, and I think because, like, you know, for different purposes, different campaigns stick out in my mind.
Yeah.
I always go, I mean, this is so old school at this point. This is really old. But I will always love and use as an example the Austin Humane Society campaign that I think it was from 2007 or 2000. I think it even predated like my experience in animal welfare. I think I was learning about it after the fact. But where the whole campaign really relied on highlighting the human-animal bond. So it was all these really colorful posters that would show like a single animal, but then all the text as kind of like a word cloud around them was, you know, it ended on "you pick me, I heart you." So it was all these you and me kind of comparisons of like, you eat, I eat faster, you know, like you throw, I chase, like all these really amazing short moments that I think just immediately tapped into anybody who's ever owned a pet, like knows that relationship and could immediately bond with that campaign. And the other reason that I think I will never forget that campaign is it's one of the only campaigns that I've seen data collected on. So they did a pre and post data collection with that campaign so that they could measure the impact of volunteerism, adoption, donations, and all of those markers went up pretty significantly in the year following that campaign. So it's also just a good example of, you know, marketing, we don't always get that kind of data. And so it's a nice thing to go back to say like, this level of positive marketing really works. And here are the numbers that can back that up.
Nice. I remember that campaign. I don't think I knew that there was data on it.
Yeah.
That's great.
That was a good one. I think I probably just remember it from you referencing it because that was way
probably because I never stopped referencing it.
Oh man. Do you have like the top 5 organizations if people want to like check out their marketing and maybe?
I do. I actually like pull up my list so I don't forget anybody. And I actually, like, when I was thinking about this, I really wanted to highlight organizations that maybe aren't because I think we all think of some larger organizations that many people follow, but I wanted to kind of think about like smaller and mid-sized organizations. And maybe like a level of inspiration that's a little more attainable because these folks don't necessarily have large marketing staffs. So one is Monmouth County SPCA in New Jersey, Animal Welfare League of Arlington in Virginia, Southern Pines Animal Shelter in Mississippi. They have my heart. I'm completely biased because I worked with them a few years ago, but they do a great job. Oakland Animal Services in California, I think, does an excellent job, especially for a pretty large shelter that is often under pressure. One Tail at a Time in Chicago is my rescue kind of shout out. And then in terms of not adoption related marketing, Rough Haven Crisis Sheltering in Salt Lake City, Utah does, they have a very unique role in the community in terms of kind of safety net services. But they do such a great job of storytelling that is both respectful of the people involved, because they're often, taking pets while people are receiving treatment or are experiencing homelessness or something like that. And they're so respectful of their clients, while also being really joyful about the message that they're sharing. And I think it's a tough needle to thread, and they do it so well.
Nice.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to check all those guys out. I don't know. I think I've heard of a few, but not all of them. Very cool. What about like social media groups we should be following? I know there's one animal shelter social media Facebook group that I follow that I always get really good information from.
Yeah, I always really recommend them just because it's such a nice community sharing group. Like, you could go in there and ask a question or something that you're struggling with, and at the very least, you're going to get catharsis of other people struggling with the same thing. And at the best, you get some really great examples of what other people are doing. And that's the major one that I'm aware of. Like, there's not a lot of other marketing specific little pockets. I know that the Maddie's Pet Forum, there are some really good conversations sometimes in there, especially if you're not using Facebook. That's a nice place to also get some of that community problem solving.
No Reddit subreddits out there.
I'm such a old person now. I don't use
I don't know any either, but I thought maybe you had like a little.
I wish I was that cool, but I'm not.
Oh, yeah. What about like what is in for 2024 and like out for 2024? Have you heard any of these like little
I love an in-out moment. I have to think
not to put you on the spot.
No, it's a good one. I think that I mean, in my super uncool book, always in is, and I think specifically in for 2024 is probably more prioritizing genuine connection, right? So I think that we can strip down sometimes some of the chasing every single trend or trying to be very of the moment, and sometimes just going back to the basics of just genuine connection, especially on behalf of the animals we're working for, I think is always in. I don't know what would be out though. I don't feel qualified to say.
Always for us is making assumptions about dogs based on their breed label. Is out.
Definitely. You're right. That goes.
Yeah.
Although I think it is timely, right? Sometimes it feels like we're taking a little bit of like a time travel back a few years. So I think that it's a really timely reminder to say that, for sure.
Yeah, we're pulling some stuff out of our attic for sure. This past year, just trying to get with the amount of dogs and sheltering and, trying to the amount of turnover.
And I think that's such a good point, is like, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. So I think that part of the conversation is just, are there things that we can look back at from 5 or even 10 years ago that were really successful at the time? Really successful engagement tools that both like did some light education for the community, but also were really engaging and helped them realize, where and when they could support sheltering. I think it's okay to look. I think it's not only okay, it'd be helpful to look back a little bit and not always just try to reinvent the wheel.
Love it.
And I think for animal welfare, we have that unique problem of high rates of turnover of staff. So it's also very likely that like we have a lot of folks who are now in leadership positions that maybe didn't, they weren't around for that first round of some of these conversations that do feel really familiar from 10 years ago or more. And that it's helpful for them also to be able to work from a playbook that already was successful.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been planning internships for September. Bringing back the internship, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
But like digging into like really old agendas from like 2009 or whatever to see like what were we talking about then, what can we bring back, like what's needed more now than that wasn't needed when we were doing them in 2017.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. And then I'm finding like all these old posters that, you know, before my time for like the internships, that's like been super fun for me to see all like the like historical Animal Farm stuff, not like the historical, but you know.
that's amazing.
Yeah, really. I want to like do a little mini like marketing historical gallery for
right
Animal Farm somewhere. Yeah, it's great.
That would be fun.
Yeah. Oh man. What else? What is like something, what are other things that'll be helpful for people? I know there's like a lot of resources out there for bio writing that you created at HeartSpeak that I think are really good outside of ChatGPT that I always reference. So that's a super great resource. Was there anything else like, given the amount of time everybody has right now, that will be helpful for them to access?
Yeah, I think bio writing is a huge one. I think that we overlook sometimes how important that is, that we have something, that we're sharing information in that way, that bios are really uniquely kind of designed to do, whether those bios are going onto social media, you know, in the form of videos or photos, or if they are existing on, you know, Adopt a Pet or one of the websites like that. I think having valuable information there is so important and that there's really a tool for no matter where you're at, right? So like depending on the time that you have, like if you're using ChatGPT or like a combination of a fill in the blank bio, you know, like pulling out a template and just doing some light fill in the blank and then you plug that into ChatGPT or something like that so that it can zhuzh it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that being able to use a number of tools from the toolbox, I think is really important. And one of the questions that I get sometimes with, especially like HeartSpeak has some really fun, but more elaborate bio writing strategies. So like an interview style bio,
I love that.
right? It's like one of my favorites.
They're so cute.
Very fun. And ChatGPT can help a lot with that, especially if you're kind of like, how do I phrase the question or the answer or something like that. And I always tell people like, you know, for the animals that you're pretty sure are going to move quickly through your system just by nature of how your system works or who this animal is, like that's maybe the ones that you're doing more fill in the blank and or just writing a bio from the heart that you are sharing, you know, important information in. But for animals that are experiencing a longer length of stay, something that is more creative, like the interview strategy, can be a real attention grabber, especially when you use that on social media. So it's about deciding on your priority list and how to place your resources, because nobody has a lot of time, and I totally get that. And depending on how many animals you're caring for, that can be daunting. So I think using a combination of tools is really where you can get the most out of it, you know?
Yeah. So many great tools out there that you created on HeartSpeak's website there.
Oh, thank you.
All right, ready for the lightning round?
I am.
So I just put these together for fun as like what would you choose, like in the quick moment of like, I don't know, trying to get the marketing done, like what would you prefer?
Yeah.
So photos or videos?
I'm gonna go with video.
Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, or something else?
I'm gonna say Instagram. And that is mostly probably just showing my age and comfortability level.
On Instagram, would you do reels, stories, or feeds first?
I'm gonna say mix it up. but I think first sometimes I would say feed, because you can repurpose something in the feed really nicely into, you know, some of the other into stories certainly. But I would say that the true magic is in mixing up your strategy.
How about dressing up your pet or keeping them in their birthday suits?
I'm not going to answer that directly. I'm going to say it depends on what the animal will enjoy. But my personal preference is birthday suits. But I would say depends on what they like, right?
Yeah. Short captions or long captions?
That's another break the rules sometimes. So I would say sometimes I would say short captions are great, but I think that sometimes we're prioritizing the length of captions over the value of the information that's in them, right? So it still has to be, it has to be valuable. Like there's nothing, even if something is performing well in the algorithm because it's short and sweet, but nobody's really getting anything out of it, like it loses its value for us. So there's a time and a place for a long caption, and I think you shouldn't be afraid to break the rules.
Okay. Good to know. What about hashtags? Are we putting them in the captions or are we putting them in the comments? Are hashtags even a thing? I don't even know. Are they a thing on Facebook still?
I think
Help me out here.
I think less so on Facebook. There was a conversation, I think a year or two ago about like, were they even valuable on Instagram? And I think I've seen some articles since then that said like, yeah, we should still be using them on Instagram. I favor them in the comments instead of the caption, just because I think it can seem less overwhelming. The more text that's in that caption, the more I think we're just inviting people to gloss over what we're writing. So it makes what we are writing a little bit more valuable to put those in the comments.
Do you have some favorite animal welfare hashtags?
I'm terrible with hashtags.
All dogs are individuals.
My true confession. Yeah, exactly. I always actually like really favor a location-based hashtag. So
interesting.
If you are, a shelter in Virginia Beach or something, like being able to figure out what your local hashtags are and what people are using, I think is way more important than using big giant hashtags like adopt or something like that, because I think you're narrowing the pool a little bit of reach, which is actually what you want in that case.
That is
I love that.
Smart. Yeah. When should we be posting? Mornings, evenings, afternoons?
Yes.
And how often? How often should we be posting?
I think I would love to see more evening posts, actually. Like, I think that we sometimes forget to schedule into the evening because it's when we're not at work, so we're not thinking of that always in the evening, but you can schedule ahead. And I think that tends to be, everyone I know is like scrolling their phones before bed, despite how many articles tell us that that's unhealthy for us. So being able to post in the evening and kind of capture people in that moment, or everyone else I know is scrolling first thing when they wake up. So to get higher up in their feed, for the next day, I think is really valuable. I think how often we're posting per day is a pretty individualized decision at this point, like with how advanced algorithms have gotten. The algorithm is responding to your activity, right? So if you're already an organization that tends to post pretty often, that's probably already working in your favor. But I will say, like, I just had a conversation with an organization that has a really high intake of dogs specifically, and they're only posting once a day. And they were only posting like certain dogs on certain days, so like Foster Fridays, and they were very into the theme of posting different days. And the problem with that is, like, if you are only posting foster animals on a certain day, or you're only posting older dog, you're only doing senior Sunday or something like that, but you have 300 senior dogs in your care, that's only 52 Sundays in the whole year that you can post that dog, So being able to recognize that depending on what your circumstances are, you're probably going to have to scale your marketing kind of decisions and your marketing strategy based on your need is really important. So like if I had 600 dogs in my care, I probably would step up how often I'm posting to meet the demand of because now we're only talking about one program too, right? We're only talking about the adoption program. We're not even talking about their need to solicit volunteers or to, solicit donations or all the other moving parts of a marketing strategy. So I think that we have to think really hard about not just pleasing the algorithms, because I think it's also a little bit of a lost cause. It's always changing. And so you have to find the pocket that your organization fits into that also meets your organization's strategic needs.
And how do you feel about always asking for something on a post, or, like having some sort of action every single time you post, like do this or do this?
Yeah, like a call to action.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important to give people clear direction. So I think that, and actually, like going back to our conversation about videos, I think that that's a really important thing that we're sometimes missing from really stellar videos, that then either in the video or in the caption, we're not giving a clear call to action of like, in the best case scenario, an amazing video or an amazing photo is going to go a little bit viral, right? Even if it's just within your local community. And if people don't ultimately connect that with your organization or know, like, where do I even go if I wanted to learn more about adopting this animal? I think that we forget that piece of the puzzle sometimes because we're so close to it, right? Like we forget what people in the community don't know about interacting with our organization. So I think a call to action that says like, visit the link in our bio, and then making sure that your links in your bio are definitely updated to meet that need is so important to getting people off of social and into the next phase of engagement, right? It's not just about making them happy while they're scrolling. It's about getting a result at the end of the day.
Yeah. It would be nice if you could put links in the captions, though. It's like that's been a real struggle for me. Anyway.
I do, yeah. I have so many questions about why that is, why Instagram is sticking with like,
especially because they're the same company now, and even on their like scheduling platform, it's like you have to go back in and change the for the two. It seems
like they're just very wary of becoming like the second Facebook, so they're sticking within certain certain like original constructs, I guess. But I have the same questions, like especially when someone is new to Instagram. And I actually think like you've touched on something that I'm always surprised at, how many organizations that are really prolific at marketing on Facebook but are not really using Instagram effectively. And I think part of it is the link in bio piece of things. Like it's that worry over like how are we going to get people to take action, or like what is the call to action if we're using Instagram. And I think that it also ties back into like that question of like feed stories or reels. And I think it's a reason why I always recommend that people are reposting their reels or their feed posts into their stories, because we can use the linked sticker and just make it a little bit more easier when people are looking through stories. They can click from there, which I think is just kind of like double insurance that Instagram gives us. So like if someone doesn't see something in the feed, they could possibly see something in stories, and vice versa. I kind of like that we have a couple of opportunities on that platform to engage people.
Yeah. And Instagram has those like shop now buttons. They just need to like integrate it into other things.
Yeah. But they've come such a long way. Like, do you remember when you could only use the link sticker if you had 10,000 followers or more? Like they have come a long way in terms of that version of accessibility. It'll be interesting to see how it keeps growing, I guess.
Yeah. I think the only other question I have for you is to tell me one non-animal related thing about yourself.
Oh, right. I love gardening. It's like my happy place. So I already like started seeds for this year. Like the only thing that like, gets me through the winter, I feel like, anymore is like, I'm gonna grow baby plants.
What are you growing? Flowers, vegetables, both?
Both. Yeah. I like mixing it up a little bit. But
That's good. I try to garden every year, and then sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm still working on not
I will say I have
overwatering
a
or
very
underwatering.
I have a pretty like hands-off approach once I get everything in the ground. I'm like, like I'll pull weeds and stuff, but I'm terrible at when you're supposed to thin seedlings and you're like take them out because they need space to grow and like throw some away. I'm too precious about it. I'm always like, I'm just gonna let all these carrots grow right next to each other, and then they're all like grown together. And
Yep. I have the same problem for sure. All right. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much. This has been super informative for me.
Oh, yeah. Very
Who
helpful.
is trying to, run the NCRC social media page, and now I have some other ideas to get that going more. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. This was fun. And anytime that you want to talk about that kind of stuff, I'm game.
Yeah, we should do like another segment like on just something super specific.
Yeah, the language piece is so interesting to me. Like, I think that's such talk about in and out. I think refining our language is always in, and not using jargon is always out. There's so many things to talk about in that vein of language. And I think it's where there's so many stumbling blocks that are avoidable when it comes to that specific topic,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. We have a plan. We're going to talk about language. Maybe we'll have Cynthia and you on at the same time.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.